Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Eddie Marcus again, spokesman and advocate of basic human rights for all people. I keep putting these videos together for you, hoping that something miraculous will happen. And that miraculous thing is that something would jar you and cause you to wake up to the realities of life. Well, today I've chosen to speak to you on the subject matter, God's way versus your way. And in preparation for this, I have put together a few notes that I'd like to share with you that would help to get my message across. Well, I want to talk to you about a note that I have here that says, I believe, something that the Pope said. Here in this newspaper, it says that in Vatican City, the Pope Francis used strong language on Easter Sunday to call for peace in parts of the world torn by war and conflict, including Syria, the Israeli-Gaza border, and countries in Africa. And further down, he made the comment, "This is Easter. May the light of the risen Christ illuminate the conscience of all political and military leaders, so a swift end can be brought to the carnage." What? The light of the risen Christ is supposed to have some significance in eliminating war? The light of the risen Christ, what does that mean to a people who recognize that Christ has been put on a level of having something directly to do with the betterment of their lives, and yet they never see the betterment of that? And when someone comes to them and say, the risen Christ, look to that, it sounds like a joke. It sounds like a trick. So why would they pay any attention to someone who talks about the risen Christ, absent of that condition that made Christ so popular? That is something we must consider, ladies and gentlemen. Earlier, on another page, I wrote a note about what they call here, they call this correct fake news on fact-checking day. Now, this is an article. I'm only going to read a paragraph. It says, in 2018, as it turns out, International Fact-Checking Day will not be a day of celebration. The focus now must be on educating people about the dangers of living in a world where facts are seen by some as optional or malleable. Fakery is a viable way to make a living, or even to support an entire Macedonian town, and the delivery systems for falsehoods can be more successful than those delivering the opposite. Now, making a living can be more prosperous pursuing fakery and lies than the truth. And the systems that are available to utilize this are innumerable. Now here again, what are we talking about? We're talking about systems that have failed the people. Systems that have allowed people to feel pain and suffering that God, my friend, have promised would never happen under certain conditions. And these conditions have been kept silent before men of the world, people of the world. And so now we have an article indicating that there's so much fakery out here going on. We don't know what is the truth. And so you got here, what is the purpose of fakery? What is the purpose of deception? It's to divide people so people can be ignorant and you can exploit them. Exploitation. This, my friend, is still on the line of God's way versus your way. I have a couple of more notes here I'd like to share with you. Yeah, one here is the Pledge of Allegiance. I ran across this. Let me see if I can pull it up. And I want to share this with you. It is very interesting, I think. It goes to this, the Pledge of Allegiance. Check this out. The Pledge of Allegiance was written in August 1892 by the socialist minister Francis Bellamy, who lived from 1855 to 1931. It was originally published in the Youth's Companion on September 8, 1892. Bellamy had hoped that the pledge would be used by citizens in any country. In its original form, it reads, "I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." You heard that? It doesn't sound like the one you're familiar with, does it? Well, in 1923, the words, "the flag of the United States of America," were added. And at this time it reads, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." Now that sounds a little bit different still than what you are familiar with, is it not? Well, let's see. In 1954, in response to the communist threat of the times, President Eisenhower encouraged Congress to add the words, "under God," creating the 31-word pledge we say today. Bellamy's daughter objected to this alteration, but today it reads, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." Now this is the one that we are familiar with. Many people might think that the Pledge of Allegiance came by the Founding Fathers, but no, it was added in 1954 by President Eisenhower talking with Congress to get this done. Now, we as a nation, up to this point, is, if we use the pledge, it had nothing to do with God. And so that kind of gives us some understanding why, perhaps, when we talk about God in schools, we found reasons not to consider God. And I'm sure that the premise there is because it was never considered in the beginning. And to add it because of communist threat did not change the mindset of the people. And so when we say one nation under God, who does that include? Who does it identify? Especially in a world of fakery. Now let me go a little bit deeper in this message, my friends. God's way versus your way. Now when I speak of God's way versus your way, I'm speaking on a broader sense to perhaps that separation between the people of this country. There are many separations, but there is a focus on the two major separations. One is Republicans and Democratic on the political scene. Now we have a representative from the present administration, and it's Donald Trump. And Donald Trump represents the Republican view. And yet it is not totally representative of the Republican perspective as we know it to be, because it includes a lot of information that would be doctrinal to hate, and hate groups who have pursued and supported the things that Donald Trump is presently doing. So what we look at is building walls. What we look at is kicking people out of the country. What we look at is breaking agreements with other allied countries in an attempt for what? All about money, all about livelihood, all about the kinds of things that represents your way. But we won't just stick that on the Republicans and Donald Trump. We also can put that on the Democrats with Barack Obama. With Barack Obama, we can kill two birds with one stone, because we got the Democratic Party and we got a black man. And we say that because we've always had white men, and to that they have been no different. And so we can see that even with the black man sticking with the Democratic persuasion, the outcome is still the same. The problems that exist in any time still continues to exist because of our submission to an ideology that is our view. And our view, absent of God's view, is what we have here today. And ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that when I speak to you from my heart. I speak to you from one who has been in the wilderness for 40 years. And when I say wilderness, I'm talking about being outside of the main structure, being outside of the main premise, looking and implementing whatever ideas I could in a process that gives me feedback that allows me to understand what I speak to you here today. That is, my friends, that Republican, Democrat, and anybody else way is no good. Now that's speaking from experience and knowledge. More contemporary example would be the governorship of the state of Minnesota. Minnesota has had a governor by the name of Tim Pawlenty. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Pawlenty served about 2 terms. And he decided not to run. He tried some other things like running for president. It failed. And now we have the office being vacated by a Democrat. And several Republicans and few Democrats are vying to become the new governor. And out of that comes Tim Pawlenty, who says, I want another term. Now, when you think about what Tim Pawlenty did when he was governor, there's nothing to highlight it, but I won't say he was any worse than any other governor. He was just filling an office, doing a few things to say the system keeps rolling. It didn't break down, it didn't grow up, it just kept on rolling. And so by Tim Pawlenty coming back again, assuming that he is elected or selected, whatever is appropriate, it doesn't mean that there's anything significant going to happen. It's just a repeat of what has been going on all the time. A repeat of Republicans coming to the White House. A repeat of Democrats coming into the White House representing you, the people, but not doing anything to progress the nation, but as we can see right now, doing a lot of things to cause the suffering of this country. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when I speak to you, I speak again from the God perspective. And many times you might hear me and think that I'm preaching, and I do preach sometimes in churches. But when I preach, I don't preach the history. You know, I'm not knocking it. That's other preachers' job. I don't preach the stories about God, about Jesus and his life work. I mention it every now and then to prove a point. But I'm not standing up there telling you these stories to educate you about that part of history. What I do and what I'm given to do is take that story and what it meant and what it means and apply it today when we go forward in the future of your lives. When we go forward in the future of your lives from the context of what Jesus, this God, Son, whom you go to church every Sunday and Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays, every day some of you get a chance to be in church, talking about and getting information about the history of God and his Son and this world, and yet not being able to use it in any more of a fashion that would create what we have today, what we consider a hellish situation. And so many of you might be asking right now, well, you've talked about the Republicans' way and the Democrats' way, but what is God's way? Well, when you think of God's way, even when you go back to that Pledge of Allegiance under God, when you think of God's way, you look at it like this. When you have a situation that needs repairs, you call the experts. Experts are familiar with what goes on in a particular situation. You don't call someone outside of that particular situation to give you information about something that they know nothing about. In other words, when your computer breaks down, you don't call the telephone company unless they can give you directions to the computer company or the computer techs. You don't call the radio and the TV stations because they have no knowledge of that. You call the computer geeks. You call the computer experts. And so when you start talking about God's way, you don't just call anybody and everybody. I got somebody calling me right now. I got a pastor, look at me. Let me call you right back. Okay? We got something that's talking about God's way. So you call God's experts. But now God experts are not the ones that you see on television talking about planting seeds, talking about donating money, talking about how you don't tithe and how you expect something from God. What they're actually saying, you tithe, we can give a little to the shelter, we can give a little bit to the Salvation Army, that kind of stuff, which promotes the current system of hellishness that we are going through every day. And we're not talking about the ones who are asking you to plant $1,000 seed, $100,000 seed, and God is going to bless you, or to buy them planes so they can travel over the country to mislead more people and even go outside of the country and mislead even more people. When I'm speaking to you, I'm talking to you about the method that has been designed from the beginning of time to offer peace and well, I'll just call it this, to offer heavenliness to you, the people. God's way. God's way includes the creation of the earth. And I look at the earth sometime as a mother's womb. Mother's womb is, you plant a seed, you plant that egg, and it starts to developing, and everything that egg needs to develop into a human being, a breathing human being waiting to jump out into the world and express itself, is in that womb. That's the way the earth is. Everything that has associated with this earth, whether it's above it, seen and unseen, on it, seen and unseen, in it, seen and unseen, is here for all the living things that's on this earth, to serve the living. So you and your creation is a egg to the earth. And from the earth comes all of your nourishments, all of the things that you need to grow and to develop into a tool whereby you can be instrumental in the creation of heaven on earth. Each of you have been given a gift, first of all, to supply the needs that you need for survival, food and clothing and shelter. And it provides for you something to assist you in growing, like education, unlimited and unrestricted, and to protect you from the sicknesses and the diseases that might come upon you, health care. And my friends, God has a wonderful way of doing that and planning out that would be carried forth by giving each of you your gifts. Those gifts that allow you to receive the greatest joy you could possibly ever receive, greater than, let's say, cream on the top, because it's your engagement, engaging in the creative process of all the things that I've mentioned here, that makes you be subject to no other outside of what your responsibility is to yourself and to the creative process that indulges itself in that heaven on earth. You don't owe any man a debt outside of your love. You don't owe any man any fees and other costs. You don't owe yourself allegiance to a king, a queen, a president, a pope. You owe your allegiance, my friends, not to a flag, not to your country, but you owe your allegiance to God Almighty. Check it out. Owe your allegiance to God Almighty. And your allegiance is amplified by your doing. And it is recognized because it is doing unto others who you can see or you can't see, but they're humans. Doing unto others as you would have others to do unto you. That's your real sign of your allegiance to the invisible God. My friends, my friends, my friends. All of the people in the church everywhere should agree with me on that. All of the poor people everywhere should agree with me on that, recognizing that the way God has been presented to them in the past has never allowed these things to be met. But a man who has lived in the wilderness, a man who has suffered just like you have suffered, who have watched people abuse you and been abused themselves stand before you today and say, by the power of God, I offer you God's way of doing things. And I'm not going to say that the Republicans are going to do it or the Democrats are going to do it. I'm saying you're going to do it, because the power to create it and cause it to happen, God has put in your hands. I'm only a messenger to stand here and tell you what God has shown me to tell you. And if you reject this, you can't blame God. You can't blame a Republican, a Democrat. The only one you can blame is indeed your very, very selves. And so, ladies and gentlemen, having given you this information, I let you know that I'm asking the people of the state of Minnesota to allow me to replace Al Franken as the senator from Minnesota. But I'm not going to be on the ballot for a Democrat or a Republican, because those does not represent God. So I'm running Eddie Marcus. You must write my name in a blank space on the ballot. Eddie Marcus, you must write my name. You know what you're talking about. You're saying that you are committed to play your part in this creative process to bring peace, to bring prosperity, to bring happiness to the American, and not just America, but to the world. You are saying that. And I want to go to Washington so I can educate these politicians up there, the Congress, House of Representatives, and the senators, and at least speak to their constituency so that they will know the beauty of life as I shared with you. And that when 2020 come along, we won't be looking for a Republican candidate or continuation of Trump. We won't be looking for a Democrat candidate of a continuation of what the Democrats do, but allowing you a chance. We won't be even looking for the Electoral College to put somebody in. We will be looking for you to take your role in government and make this world, recreate this world, create a system that allows God's way to see heaven on earth, where you are happy, where you are prosperous, where you are peaceful. My. Boy, that sure sounds good to me. And for those of you who can't see that, whoa, it must be rough out here. I want to thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen, for giving me this your time. Once again, this is Eddie Marcus, spokesman and advocate for God's way of life, that you, every man, woman, child in this country, and ultimately on this earth, can experience the joy of life that only God can give if you say, okay. Till next time, bye-bye. Man, did you hear that? That was